Imagine waiting 2 weeks to know if you got a like or not, or a thumbs up. In the decades before the internet, people made comics, and we reached out to each other. What was it like? This is the Sequential Artists Workshop, and these are the 90s mini-comics oral history archives. Hi, this is Tom Hart. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Sam Henderson. Sam is the person that introduced me to mini-comics. Before I saw Sam's comics, I thought the only way to have them seen was in a newspaper or in a greeting card. And Sam was photocopying as a teenager in middle school. And that completely surprised me and changed my life. Hope you enjoy this interview conducted by cartoonist Carlo Antunes.
Please say your name, the date, and where you're recording from.
I'm Sam Henderson. It's the 19th of December, 2022, and I'm recording from my home in Woodstock, New York.
What are some comics publications that you created or were a part of in the pre-internet era?
I did a comic called Magic Whistle in the 90s where I know most people I'm still in my age, I'm still in touch with now. When I was a kid in high school, I did a comic called Captain Spaz. Magic Whistle's basically what I do. I still do now, and most of the people I met as an adult that are still doing comics now are the people that I'm still in touch with.
What are some locations you worked from in the 80s and 90s?
In the 80s, I worked in Woodstock, where I'm back now. But in the 90s, I lived in New York, and as an adult in the 90s, I worked from my apartments in New York and then in Los Angeles. Actually, I moved to Los Angeles in 2000, so I don't know if that counts. And I stopped doing mini comics by that point. But yeah, in the 90s, I lived in New York, and that's when I was corresponding with people like Tom Hart.
Yeah, I read that you guys went to school together.
Yeah, that's where I first met him at School of Visual Arts.
Yeah. And how would you describe your comics work?
But mostly just like one-page blackout jokes.
Tell us how you made your comics, what tools you used, how you readied them for print, and so on.
I mostly used microns and rapidographs. I did them on first I did them on just on letter size paper, on letter paper, and then on Bristol. And I just Xeroxed them. I did them in proportion to what I was doing. First, I did them actual size, and then I learned to do them as professionals would do on Bristol.
And how did you like ready it for print?
I used just letter size paper. Actually, I used the letter size paper the whole time. But first, I just pasted it with rubber cement onto just regular paper, and then I discovered a graph paper that had lines so I could do a straight line without using a ruler basically the graph squares were non-photo blue, so they wouldn't show up on Xerox paper.
How many comics did you print? That's one of the questions.
First, with the mini comics in the 90s, I printed about 50 copies, and the demand kept growing, so I ended up printing like 100 and then 200, but I printed about 50 at a time, and then I just printed more as I would need them.
Great. Yeah, I saw that. Sorry, you can go ahead.
I didn't even bother with writing second printing or third printing.
Oh yeah.
In the end, with my address or copyright notice, I just printed more as I needed them.
Yeah, I saw. I read that you use this key thing at Kinko's where you could have just like kept putting it back to 0 to print more.
Yeah, well, in order for the Xerox machines to work, you had to put the key in, and it counted how many copies you made, at some branches, you could just slam the key counter on a table, and the counter would just go back to zero. So you could just put it back in, and when you had to give the key counter back to the cashier, it looked like you made only 5 or 10 copies, even though you made hundreds.
That's great. Tell us when you first saw evidence of people making their own comics.
Well, when I was in high school, as I said, I maybe in Comics Journal or Amazing Heroes, they plugged something called Fandom Times, and it was just they just made a blurb, and it was like a survey of other people doing Xerox comics. So I sent away for something called Fandom Times in the mail, and it turned out there were other high school students doing these little mini comics. So I traded with them, and Fandom Times eventually evolved into the guy who published that quit. He did SPCE, which stood for Small Press Comic Explosion. Then he quit, and a bunch of people did Comics FX. I forget what the FX stood for. And that's about the time I went to college and met Tom Hart and a few people like that.
Tell us a story of getting a comic that surprised you or inspired you.
The comic that surprised me when I first saw it was a comic called Cynical Man. It was all stick figures. That's something I saw in the 80s. There's this guy, Matt Fiesel. He was in his 20s and I was in my teens. And that was the comic that I showed people in college to inspire them to do their own comics. And that's when I met Tom Hart, and he started publishing his own comics too. And when I didn't see him anymore, and he moved to Seattle, he met a bunch of people there, and they were all publishing their own comics. And some of them I sort of knew, just trading them through comics, because they were being plugged in some of the comics I was reading. So he would have discovered mini comics in some other way if I hadn't met him. Like there are just so many different mini comic circles, each thinking they're the only ones.
Yeah. You partially just answered this, but I don't believe you mentioned Fact Sheet 5. Did you ever order a comic or write to someone as a result of seeing their work in Fact Sheet 5?
Yeah, that happened much later in the mid 90s. Yeah. Because Fact Sheet 5 basically got a bunch of like the different circles together. That's when I discovered there were other circles besides the ones that I knew of, and that covered more than comics, and that had all kinds of different zines, and then had different departments covering different kinds of zines and comics and different subject matters. And like there were just different kinds of music fanzines, different kinds of comics zines, and each had their own chapters within Fact Sheet 5. So I sent away for some things I saw there. I don't know if you've ever seen a Fact Sheet 5. There's really no illustrations in them.
I've never seen them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know if you see other people that saw it personally, because I mean, probably people there have Fact Sheet 5s.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm from Florida, so I went to saw in person. I'm in Brooklyn right now, but
yeah,
yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna look that up when I go over there. Again, did you ever advertise in one of the above, Fact Sheet 5, SPCE, or Comics FX? And or was your work reviewed in it?
Yeah, well, it was reviewed in all three.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Fact Sheet 5 had ads, but the other two I put it like, because my friend Bobby and Bobby, who I went to high school with, we were doing comics in high school, and the ads were really cheap, so we did ads and also got reviewed, and some of them profiled us, and even our local paper profiled us, which seemed like a big deal in a small town of 2,000, even though nobody else would have seen it.
Tell us the story of how you met your closest friend in comics when you
Um,
started.
well, when I started, I mean, we were just in classes
Yeah.
together, and we both had a common ground for doing comics.
Was it like an art class, or you guys just?
We were just just in general classes, just
Yeah.
English and science and things like that. So as it was just like seventh or eighth grade, and we might have been in. I think we were in art classes too, but basically just knowing each other and just doing doodling and things like that. That's how we decided. And his father had a Xerox machine where he worked, so we just decided to do our own comics.
Tell us about the first show or con situation where you saw other people doing the kind of work you did.
The first show when I was a kid in high school was basically the Chicago Con, like in the mid '80s, where I just met some of the other high school students that I was trading comics with. But then after that, like in the mid '90s, there was the San Diego Con, which is Comic Con now, which is thing you see all over TV and places like that. That has nothing to do with small press comics. It's just people dressed up in superhero costumes, and it's not even comics in print. It's just comics like things. But in the mid '90s, it was basically the only game in town. You didn't even have MoCA or SPX or any kind of convention like that. So you just had to find. You just saw people you knew among cosplay people in San Diego. San Diego is really something for everyone.
Yeah, I've never been.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, you don't need to go to San Diego anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah.
And like MoCA and SPX are as big as San Diego were,
Yeah.
or even something like comic like they don't have the Comics Arts Brooklyn anymore.
Yeah.
Like even those are pretty big. Those were pretty big when they the last few years.
Yeah, when they were going on.
Yeah, and sometimes like even some you find out afterwards that people were there that you just missed, you didn't even see. And San Diego's used to be smaller than that.
Tell us when you felt the most connected in your community.
The like in the mid '90s or so, at the peak when I was doing comics and just getting my strip published in alternative weeklies, like smaller paper, like each city had its own local paper, and I had a comic strip that was self-syndicated in just different local papers that were basically places that plugged local concerts, and they were basically places for 900 sex phone numbers. But people seeing my comic strip in there, basically, and seeing my mini comics in local comic stores, I didn't even know were there. That was where people knew of my comics, and it seemed like the top of the world, but it really wasn't.
Who were or are some of your most significant peers in comics?
Well, Tom Hart is the person I've known the longest. I've known him since like '87 or so, '87 or '88. And just people I've known through him, like a lot of people that were in the Seattle scene in the early '90s. That's around. I mean, that's around the same time that Nirvana and the whole run. Not that we knew any of them, but like that's when Seattle was like the hip bohemian place to be. It's like what Williamsburg was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is now. Maybe still Williamsburg. I don't know.
So did you ever do collaborations or jams with like Tom Hart or any of your other friends?
Yeah, Tom and this Mark Arsenal, who his name isn't as known in comics, but he does a lot of distribution and publishing now, but he did more actual comics back then. He was more Gary Panner inspired, and Tom was more Charles Schultz inspired. But the three of us did a lot of comics together.
How did working with them like affect your own work?
Um, well, I through them I basically learned the two different sides of comics. Like Charles Schultz and Gary Penn are the two different sides of the spectrum, kind of.
Yeah. Tell us how you traded or sold your comics.
Uh, I kind of sold them just like each like different comic stores in different cities each had their own like mini comics department, and I sold things through people that worked there like were all aspiring comics people themselves, and so they kind of had like a little mini comics department there, and I just traded through with other mini comics artists that basically sent letters to comics like Eight or just other comics I was buying in comic stores, just little like $3 or $4 mini comics, not mini comics, $3 or $4 alternative comics, just things that would be graphic novels now were like 24 to 32 pages.
Did you feel connected to a particular store or venue that supported you and your community?
Well, just there were a few different places in New York, like Jim Hanley's Universe, St. Mark's Comics. They were pretty supportive of mini comics, and there were a few places I didn't know knew who I was that asked me to do signings, like Million Year Picnic in the Boston area asked me to come out once, and I visited San Francisco when they had the first alternative press expo. I don't know if you've ever gone. It's kind of like MoCA. And I went there, and I didn't realize that they all knew me there. And there's a store, Comic Relief. There was a store, Comic Relief out there, and a bunch of us did a signing out there.
Were you ever part of a distribution collective like Puppy Toss or Spit and a Half?
I think I had mini comics sold by both of them, but my friend Mark, who I mentioned earlier, and I started something called Wow Cool, which I left earlier, but he kept on doing. It was basically selling other mini comics. It's kind of like Spit and a Half was more known for.
Did you actively seek out the work of others for your distro?
No, I not really. Well, I saw that others were doing it, and I asked them about it, but I didn't really I didn't see them as a much larger audience. I just saw them as another means of getting my stuff out there and having more people know that it existed.
And what do you miss about that time?
Uh, I just missed that I didn't have to find work, and for some reason there was just I had more enthusiasm when I wasn't pressured to do work, when I had more day jobs like telemarketing or something like that, and just had to I just did work on my own, and I wasn't hired or didn't have restrictions or anything like that. It was much freer time.
So what do you not miss about that time?
That I didn't make any money doing comics.
I read in your the letter you sent also about how you said that you're a little envious of the cost, how like there's no the cost is basically close to nothing here because you used to have to send out like original artwork to get published or printed in something, and now people can send just hundreds and hundreds of copies of the same work.
Yeah, I mean, I had to make Xerox copies, and you of course had to pay for the copies, and now you can just scan stuff and just like send it to people and CC them or put it on your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram page, and just get a response within seconds instead of having to wait a week or two. And like just other people just don't want to, like sometimes people have other obligations or don't want to bother to write something or just set it aside. But Instagram, you can just write something right away. And it's kind of like the intro to this project where it said like years ago you had to wait to get a like instead of instantly, and now you don't have to pay for anything anymore. It's just there for free on your computer.
Yeah.
And you can just clean it up without having to wait and find out what it looks like. And it doesn't cost 10 times as much for color. You just color it yourself.
Yeah. And tell us one more memory.
One more memory.
Yeah, one more memory that stands out to you.
Not much that I haven't already said. It just seemed like there was more freedom, and you could just and fewer obligations, and you just do what you wanted spontaneously.
Okay, cool. So those are all the questions.
All right.
So thanks for doing this.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. All right.
Thanks for listening. This is the 80s, 90s pre-internet mini-comics oral history archives. This is a project of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find out more about this project or about the courses we offer, the programs we offer in comics and visual literacy and graphic novels at sawcomics.org. That's SAWCOMICS.org. You can find out how to support this project through the donate button. You can also support us on Patreon at Saw Comics. You can find more of this on our YouTube channel or through various places where you get your podcasts. You can find archives of this at the University of Florida and at our other partner institutions. And waving at you from the past, this is Tom Hart, the director of the Sequential Artists Workshop. Thanks so much for listening.